Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching Newsnight on DD India, your primetime destination for news and bespoke analysis. It's good to see you this Friday evening. All right, on the show tonight, local goes global, make in India for the world. Now, Prime Minister Modi addresses heads of Indian mission abroad and stakeholders in the trade sector, calls for giving a boost to manufacturing, making India qualitatively competitive, pushing for more exports, and last but not the least, ensuring that Indian products access the international market. Another focus of his address was to make India an integral part of the global supply chain. Also on the show, India and China complete disengagement at Gogra in Ladakh in what's described as a breakthrough. All temporary structures built since the escalation of conflict in 2020 have been dismantled. Now, as per the agreement, both sides have ceased forward deployments in this area in a phased, coordinated and verified manner. What it means is this: India and China have made progress in de-escalation at 4 out of 6 flashpoints: Galwan, the north bank of Pangong Lake, the south bank of Pangong Lake and Gogra. But for now, the standoff continues in Depsang and Hot Springs. But both sides have expressed commitment to take the talks forward and resolve the remaining issues along the line of actual control in the western sector. Now, we put this piece of news in its proper perspective for you. So all that and much more coming up over the next 1 hour. But first, as always, the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi gives a clarion call for local goes global, make in India for the world in his virtual interaction with heads of Indian mission abroad and stakeholders in the trade and commerce sectors, calls for an increase in exports and creating markets for new products. The Lok Sabha passes the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill 2021. Various ghosts of retrospective tax for any indirect transfer of Indian assets before May 2012. Prime Minister hails it as an example of decisive governance, says the move is a reflection of his commitment to reforms. India and China pull back their troops from friction points at Gogra in Ladakh in disengagement along the line of actual control. Disengagement at Petrol Point 17A was agreed upon at the 12th round of military-level talks held last week. The UN Security Council meets under India's presidency, discusses about the situation in Afghanistan. Taliban assassinates the Afghan government's top media and information officer, Dawa Khan Meenapal, in Kabul, 2 days after a car bomb exploded near the defense minister's home. Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar calls on President Ibrahim Raisi of Iran, conveys personal greetings of Prime Minister Modi on his assuming office, says commitment to strengthening bilateral ties and convergence in regional interests was evident at the meet. India's highest sporting honour, the Khel Ratna Award, renamed after hockey great Major Dhyan Chand. Prime Minister Modi says he was getting many requests to honour the hockey legend, and today's move respects that sentiment. Sports Minister Anurag Thakur welcomes the decision to give sporting legends due recognition. India's women's hockey team goes down fighting in the battle for bronze. Last-minute penalty conversion by Great Britain leads to disappointment. Prime Minister Modi dials at players and coach, tells them to wipe their tears away because their stupendous effort represents spirit of new India and an inspiration for girls. And wrestler Bajrang Punia loses to Azerbaijan's Haji Aliyev 5-12 in the men's 65 kg freestyle semi-final. Punia to compete for bronze on Saturday. Meanwhile, golfer Aditya Ashok remains in contention for a silver with one more round left in the women's individual event. Right, let me dive straight into our cover story. Now, Prime Minister Modi on Friday addressed heads of Indian mission abroad and stakeholders in trade and commerce sectors. The purpose of the interaction was to provide a focused thrust to leverage and expand India's export and its share in global trade. He called for setting an ambitious target to energize all stakeholders towards expanding India's export potential and using local capabilities to fulfill the global demand. Now, right, let's head straight into our In Focus segment, in which I'm joined by a special guest. And the theme of the discussion is Local Goes Global, Make in India for the World. Now, joining me is Mr. Dilip Chenoy, Secretary General FICCI, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Chenoy, good to see you on DD India and on Newsnight in particular. First up, now I have this very generic question to ask Mr. Chenoy. The shift in emphasis for vocal for local now to local goes global. Now, the shift in emphasis, in your estimation, what does it tell you about this journey and the timing of it in particular?
So, thank you. It was a very inspiring address by the Prime Minister this evening. And, in the context of setting that target of $400 billion of merchandise export this year,
right,
he actually said that, can you look at identifying new products that could actually be exported to countries. And then he said one of his main things was, can you identify diaspora around the world? Can you connect them to their roots, to the states, to where they come from? Can they look at, what is relevant, which is manufactured there, and actually, get it exported to those countries? And how do you ensure that the states look at 75 new products that need to be, that could be exported? So the emphasis was on identifying new products, connecting states to different countries, actually getting all the missions overseas to identify products that were not being sold there. They were sold in 2 or 3 areas in their countries. Could you expand it to many more areas? But all the time looking from products for India that could be sourced. That was the first point that he made. And
right,
the second point, in the context of COVID, that people are looking at alternate supply chains. And a theme during the discussion came out that, India was respected for continuing to supply during this period. And therefore, can you look at local products and can you look at markets for them? He even referred to that point in history where India had a significant share of international trade because we had the products to export to the world.
Indeed, another discernible shift in emphasis was from Make in India now to Make in India for the World. Now, this is a take on Prime Minister's oft-repeated quote of developing in India but designed for the world or deployed for the world. Now, this emphasis on domestic manufacturing and exports, what's the sense you're getting? How will it keep India in good stead going forward?
So in many of the sectors, although it was not actually said, but this is the background of that. In many of the sectors, we did not have the scale and capacity to actually meet demand if it increased, right? And therefore, if you look at the 14 sectors where the PLI schemes were actually announced, it was to actually create scale. So the Prime Minister talked of it in terms of his 4 pillars. First was increase in manufacturing. So you got to increase in manufacturing, improve competitiveness, look at cooperation amongst state governments, and identifying more international markets. So looking at India, manufacturing these products, taking an all-stakeholder approach, working with the missions abroad, finding markets for Indian products, and therefore increasing our exports. So therefore, you make in India for the world. It was, one was the Atmanirbhar Bharat, which was there, which is looking at alternate supply chains, making sure that, they're not disruptive. We can actually provide goods and services in India. But this is one step forward where we take local products and services, in this case, local products, and make them in India for the world. In fact, he gave some very interesting examples. He actually talked about, he talked about the LED bulbs example. He said that we make the lowest cost LED bulbs, and global warming is a big issue. Can we look at exporting that? He said that most of our exports, half our exports to 4 destinations, and are at gems and jewelry, engineering goods, pharma products. Can we actually diversify this basket and look at it and see how we can use the opening up in sectors like mining, defense, coal, to develop a futuristic strategy for exports. So really it was to look at what is made in India, how can we find markets. He gave the example of honey, which was a very, very small, $0.03 million export, which went up to 300 million. So if you look at all of that, it went from 97 million by just getting a new test developed and ensuring the quality. So he kept on focusing on make in India, make in quality, make and export to the rest of the world.
Right. Another important highlight, Mr. Chenoy.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Let's, Mr. Chenoy, let me just pause you there. Let's cut across to news coming in from the United Nations in New York, where there's a meeting happening as we speak on Afghanistan.
UN compound has not been spared. The residence of the Defense Minister of Afghanistan has been attacked. An Indian journalist was murdered while he was reporting. And the fighting continues in Helmand, Herat and elsewhere. More than 100 Afghan civilians were mercilessly killed in Spin Baldog. The rapid deterioration of the security situation in Afghanistan constitutes a serious threat to regional peace and stability. It is therefore time for the international community, and in particular this Council, to take stock of the situation and decide on actions that would help bring a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire and ensure an immediate cessation of violence. Anything short of this will constitute a serious threat to regional peace and security. I would like to recall here what our External Affairs Minister said to this Council in June. A durable peace in Afghanistan requires a genuine double peace, that is, peace within Afghanistan and peace around Afghanistan. It requires harmonizing the interests of all, both within and around the country. India has been supportive of all efforts being made to accelerate the dialogue between the Afghan government and Taliban, including the intra-Afghan negotiations. If the peace process is to be successful, then it is necessary to ensure that the Taliban engage in negotiations in good faith, eschew the path of violence, sever ties with the Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations, and fully commit itself towards reaching a political solution. Violence and military threat cannot be used to strengthen the negotiating position. A tangible demonstration of this commitment is required. India wishes to see an independent, peaceful, sovereign, democratic, stable and prosperous Afghanistan. I would like to reiterate our support for an inclusive, Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled peace process. Any political arrangement or settlement in Afghanistan must ensure that the gains of the last 2 decades are protected and not reversed. These gains are non-negotiable. It should therefore preserve the constitutional democratic framework and ensure the protection of the rights of women, children and minorities. Any regime devoid of legitimacy in Afghanistan would find it difficult to garner the much-needed humanitarian and developmental assistance from the international donor community. We, as the international community, cannot afford to set the clock back. The future of Afghanistan cannot be its past. We support a leading role for the United Nations and call on the Secretary General to take an initiative towards finding a lasting and durable outcome. We welcome any move towards a genuine political settlement that leads to these objectives. The only way forward are negotiations that will provide an acceptable compromise, reflecting the Doha process, the Moscow format, and Istanbul process. For enduring peace in Afghanistan, terrorist safe havens and sanctuaries in the region must be dismantled immediately and terrorist supply chains disrupted. It needs to be ensured that Afghanistan's neighbors and the region are not threatened by terrorism, separatism, and extremism. There needs to be zero tolerance for terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. It is equally important to ensure that the territory of Afghanistan is not used by terrorist groups to threaten or attack any other country. Those providing material and financial support to terrorist entities must be held accountable. We as the international community must ensure that our commitments to Afghanistan, including to its various institutions, are maintained. On India's part, we will continue to stand with Afghanistan in ensuring that peace and stability is restored through a legitimate and transparent democratic process that is essential for the long-term stability of Afghanistan and the region. We will continue to provide all support to Afghanistan in realizing their aspirations for a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous future, free of terror, where the rights and in interests of all sections of the Afghan society are promoted and protected. Thank you. I now resume my function as President of the Council. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. I will now adjourn the meeting so that the Council can continue its discussions on the subject.
Right, so we're listening to India's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, Ambassador T.S. Tirumurthy, speaking on the issue of Afghanistan at that important UN Security Council meeting happening as we speak in New York. And joining me for more on this story is my colleague Amrit Pal Singh. Amrit, we just heard Ambassador Tirumurthy lay out India's position or stand on the issue of Afghanistan. Now, put this into context and perspective of viewers. How significant was this deliberation?
Ambassador Tirumurthy has, Ramesh, spelled out India's stated stand on what India believes should be the forward movement on Afghanistan,
right.
The approach towards conflict resolution. Ambassador Tirumurthy clearly underlined that the process has to be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, but it needs to be inclusive, which includes all minorities, women, and it has to be an inclusive process. And India believes that the way forward is through negotiations and not a unilateral imposition of the will of any particular party. These negotiations, as Ambassador Tirumurthy said, should be under the Istanbul process, the Moscow format. The negotiations should move forward, and by imposition of will or by taking territories by force is something that would not lead to conflict resolution. So that was that has been India's stated stand, which India once again put it out at the deliberations happening at the Security Council. Ramesh?
Right, on that note, Amrit, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your insights into this story we just tracked here on Newsnight, the meeting in New York, in the UN Security Council, on the situation in Afghanistan in particular. Right, going back to our top story on Newsnight, Prime Minister Modi addressed heads of Indian missions abroad and stakeholders, as I mentioned before, in trade and commerce sectors. Now, this to provide a focused thrust to leverage and expand India's export and its share in the global trade. Now, he called for setting an ambitious target to energize all stakeholders towards expanding India's export potential and using local capabilities to fulfill global demand. Let's listen into the key takeaways from the Prime Minister's address.
एक्सपोर्ट बढ़ाने के लिए 4 फैक्टर्स बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। पहला, देश में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कई गुना बढ़े और क्वालिटेटिवली कॉम्पिटिटिव होना चाहिए। दूसरा, ट्रांसपोर्ट की, लॉजिस्टिक्स की दिक्कतें दूर हो। इसमें राज्य सरकारों को भी, केंद्र सरकार को भी और जो भी प्राइवेट उसमें प्लेयर्स होते हैं, इन सबने अपनी भूमिका निभानी होगी। तीसरा, एक्सपोर्ट्स के साथ सरकार कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर के चले। भारतीय प्रोडक्ट्स के लिए इंटरनेशनल मार्केट, ये चारों फैक्टर्स एकजुट होंगे तभी भारत का लोकल ग्लोबल होगा, तभी मेक इन इंडिया फॉर द वर्ल्ड के लक्ष्य को हम बेहतर तरीके से हासिल कर पाएंगे। भारत ने रिट्रोस्पेक्टिव टैक्सेशन से मुक्ति का जो फैसला लिया है वो हमारा कमिटमेंट दिखाता है, पॉलिसीज में कंसिस्टेंसी दिखाता है। ये सभी निवेशकों को स्पष्ट संदेश देता है कि आगे बढ़ता हुआ भारत न सिर्फ नई संभावनाओं के द्वार खोल रहा है, बल्कि भारत की निर्णायक सरकार अपने वायदे भी पूरे करने की इच्छा शक्ति रखती है। बेस्ट टेक्नोलॉजी की तरफ जाना होगा, इनोवेशन पर फोकस करना होगा और R&D में हिस्सेदारी बढ़ानी ही पड़ेगी। ग्लोबल वैल्यू चेन में हमारा शेयर इसी रास्ते पर से चलकर ही आगे बढ़ेगा। कंपटीशन और एक्सेलेंस को प्रोत्साहित करते हुए ही हमें हर सेक्टर में ग्लोबल चैंपियंस तैयार करने हैं।
So as we just heard in the Prime Minister's address, he spoke about a number of issues, covered a lot of ground there. He spoke about access to foreign markets for Indian companies and products. He spoke about scaling up manufacturing. He spoke about investing in India, and also, last but not the least, innovation and research and development. Mr. Chinoy, thank you for your patience. My apologies, we had to cut live to New York for that meeting taking place on Afghanistan there. Thank you once again for joining us here on Newsnight. One final question, Mr. Chinoy. This emphasis of the Prime Minister on making India an integral part of the global supply chain, how important is that in your estimation, given the fact that we are moving already, as some call it, to a post-COVID world order or economic order, number one. And number two, very quickly, your thoughts on this Taxation Laws Amendment Bill 2021, to doing away with retrospective tax. How important do you think is that to reinstill investor confidence and making policies consistent and predictable in India? Your thoughts, Mr. Chinoy?
Ramesh, I think first of all, let me take the second part first.
Sure.
The retrospective tax amendment is historic. It is very significant. It increases India's credibility, positions the government as a listening government and an acting government, and actually will be a big boost and positive for investor sentiment towards India. Now, in regard to the exports and your question on global value chains, I think this is key, because in the pandemic, right? Earlier it was just in time, single sourcing, but during the pandemic, people are looking at alternate sources, looking at just in case, and this actually opens up a new opportunity for us, not only in our traditional sectors, but in other sectors, even organic food, fisheries. You look at many products which are made in the States. So this, if we can actually work with the investors, work with global buyers, global manufacturers, and actually get into the supply chain, then the second part of the vision today of make in India for the world will become a reality. And I think everyone present in the meeting and listening had only one comment to make. This is a great initiative. All stakeholders will work together to really realize this dream of actually this year getting to 400 billion and next year actually looking at further growth.
Right. On that, Mr. Chinoy, thank you once again for making time for us here at DD India. Appreciate it. Thank you. Right. And now to the other big story we are tracking here on Newsnight. India and China have completely disengaged from Gogra in Ladakh. The troops in this area have been in a face-off situation since May last year. Now, as per the agreement reached after the 12th round of talks held on 31st July, the disengagement process was carried out over 2 days, that's 4th and 5th August. So all temporary structures have been dismantled and verified. With this, one more sensitive area of face-off has been resolved. More in the next report.
A positive outcome from the 12th round of talks between the corps commanders of India and China. Both sides agreed on disengagement in the area of Gogra. The two sides agreed to a mutual withdrawal by forces in the latest round of the corps commander level talks. Withdrawal was effected and mutually verified on the 4th and 5th of August. All temporary structures in the area have been dismantled by both sides. The landform has been restored by both sides to the pre-standoff period.
अभी 12वां राउंड हुआ था कोर कमांडर लेवल का टॉक का हिंदुस्तान और चीन के बीच में, और इसमें जो हमारे बाकी के जो इलाके रह गए थे, हॉट स्प्रिंग, गोगरा और डिस्पांग प्लेन, इनके बारे में बातचीत हुई। और उसके अंदर हमारा जो ये गोगरा हाइट्स के उधर, हॉट स्प्रिंग के उधर, वहाँ पे PP 17, PP 11, 12, 17, 18 हैं वो जो पेट्रोलिंग पॉइंट्स हमारे, तो उनको चाइना ने ब्लॉक कर दिया हुआ था, फॉरवर्ड डिप्लॉयमेंट कर ली हुई थी। तो अब उसके अंदर एक के ऊपर सहमति हो गई है और वहाँ से हिंदुस्तान और जो चीन है, इन्होंने दोनों ने अपने अपने जो फौजें हैं वो वापस कर ली हैं।
On July 31st, in the 12th round of the meeting between India and China at Moldo near the LAC in eastern Ladakh, both countries agreed to withdrawal of troops from Patrol Point 17A, one of the friction points between the countries in the region. Disengagement between the two sides took place in February this year when both sides moved back from the banks of Pangong Lake. After talks last Saturday, a joint release said that both sides agreed to resolve remaining issues in an expeditious manner in accordance with existing agreements and protocols. The agreement ensures that the LAC in this area will be strictly observed and respected by both sides, and that there will be no unilateral change in the status quo. With this, one more sensitive area of face-off has been resolved. Both sides have expressed commitment to take the talks forward and resolve the remaining issues along the LAC in the western sector. Bureau Report, DD India.
Right, time now for our second In Focus segment, in which we are discussing about India, China disengage in Gogra, dismantle temporary structures. And joining me is a special guest, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, former DG Infantry, and will be joined momentarily by senior journalist Shekhar Iyer as well. General Kulkarni, welcome to News Night. First off, I want to get your views. How do you view this development, given that Indian diplomacy has borne fruit again, forcing China to back off?
Ramesh, we look at it this way, that on the 14th of July, the two foreign ministers met at Dushanbe. And before that, there was the 22nd meeting of the working mechanism for consultation and coordination, which was held on the 25th of June.
Right.
These two events which paved the way for the 12th round of Corps Commander level talks. And it is in these talks that there is complete disengagement at 17A at Gogra, and that what we can say with certainty is restoration of status quo ante April 2020. Now, that's a big achievement, primarily because, as I see, the Chinese have realized that the Indians are not going to budge until and unless we restore the status quo ante April 2020. The other friction points also, hopefully now that the things have started, should get resolved, and we should go back to the status quo ante, as I keep saying, April 2020. But we must keep in mind that after February 2021, there has been almost a halt to the disengagement process. And unless there is disengagement, there cannot be de-escalation. And only after de-escalation can there be peace and tranquility along the LAC. And only then can the two nations progress on any front it may be. So I think, yes, what we just said, rightly so, diplomacy has paved the way for the military level talk, which has resulted in disengagement, and it is a very sensitive area along the LAC where the disengagement has taken place. And with that, I think if it happens even at Hot Spring, subsequently at Depsang, Demchok, I think it will be a great achievement which will pave the way for at least no tension along the LAC. However, whatever I might say, we must be vigilant. we cannot put our guards down. We have to be careful. But yes, we have been able to convey to the Chinese that we mean business, and until and unless they pull back from all these friction points, there's no question of progressing talks with the Chinese.
Absolutely. Mr. Iyer, welcome to you as well for joining us on Newsnight tonight. Now, I wanted to get your views as well. How significant do you think this process of de-escalation, disengagement is in your estimation?
Well, this is the result, I would say, of not just our diplomacy, but also the political will of the government and the kind of leadership shown by our military at the spot has finally resulted in conveying the message to the other side that India will not accept any unilateral change to the status quo. I think this message has been conveyed so strongly, I think the other side realized that the only way forward was to have discussions and mutually agree upon disengagement. This is actually a proof of how India is perceived today, how Indian military strength is perceived today, and how India of 2021 is not India of 1962. Because there is a very big message in the fact that, today both sides are able to sit and they have several rounds of discussions and finally come to a conclusion, which is for, restoring the area as it was, removing completely all the the standoff structures and going back to the original position. I think there is a message of peace, but the peace does not come unless you are prepared for any eventuality. And Indian forces had shown last May and June that they are ready for anything, and our position was further amplified by our government, and that was also echoed when our foreign minister met the Chinese counterpart. On the whole, this is the result of, I would say, a strong political will shown by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his government.
General Kulkarni, I want to take up on the point that Mr. Iyer mentioned, political will, number one. And number two, he says India did well by not blinking, by not yielding, by standing up to China and calling China's bluff, so to speak. And that's paid dividend for India. Now, in your estimation, military person on this panel tonight, what is the message for the world at large, especially countries in the Indo-Pacific who have been at the, have faced the brunt, so-called, of Chinese expansionism? How will those countries view these developments? Will they be emboldened by the way India's handled this entire episode?
All the political leadership and not to blink is very, very important. The Chinese have always believed in dealing with from a position of strength, and we have shown our resolve that we are not going to accept whatever it may be. They have to pull back and restore status quo ante April 2020. And with that, all of the countries in the Indo-Pacific and all over have understood that yes, a strong resolve by a nation like India, which is rising and being seen with respect and a democracy, I think that definitely has affected. And surely the Chinese have realized now that COVID-19 has also put them on the back foot. The Chinese have also realized that they are now not with the kind of reputation with which they're known to be concerned about. They're very concerned with the reputation. And today, when they're on the back foot, at a time when the Indian Army and the government of India has shown a very strong resolve that we are not going to accept it, I think it's a very good message which has gone around the world, which has also increased our own image. At the same time, the Chinese have realized that yes, India is not what they thought it was of 1962. India means business. India will not blink. And that is what has resulted in this total disengagement. First, of course, in February 2021 at Pengangso, and now after the 4th and the 5th of August at Gogra.
Absolutely. Mr. Iyer, now the standoff began in May last year. It's been, what, 15 months since then? But in your estimation, is there enough trust built into the relationship for this to sustain going forward? Why do I ask this? Because there are two other friction points that remain unresolved. It is Hot Springs, which is near Gogra, by the way, and also Depsang. Now, in your estimation, how do you look at the remaining friction points and the resolution of those friction points going forward? And also this oft-repeated quote of trust but verify. And I was struck by this phraseology in the MEA statement in which it says, both sides have ceased forward deployments in this area in a quote-unquote phased, coordinated and verified manner, unquote. Mr. Iyer?
Well, I think the statement issued by our army itself is very clear, because it says that one more sensitive area has been resolved.
Right.
Yes, there were 6 flashpoints, of which now in 4 areas we have been able to completely disengage. And along with that, both sides have expressed today commitment to take the talk forward, which means you talked about the trust deficit. Now that trust deficit is beginning to grow.
Okay.
From a situation where we could not trust the other side at all, to a situation where we are able to trust, move forward, and actually verify. The most important part is verification. Now, verification by the both sides about their commitment also shows that things are changing, things are moving forward, the ice has been broken, and the reason it has been broken is because the other side understands our strengths, other side understands our commitment, and other side understands we mean business when we say that status quo cannot be unilaterally changed. I think this message has gone very clearly, and this has gone in military terms and had also been conveyed diplomatically. I think the other side has understood that there is no point in further escalating things there, because it is interest of the both countries that things will have to be resolved. And these are issues that have not happened overnight, but these are issues which have been persisting for a long time. We have the border talks mechanism that has to be further activated, and things will have to move forward. That's the big message coming today. The other 2 points that you mentioned, I expect that they too will be resolved in the coming rounds of talks.
Right. General Kulkarni, I'm running out of time, so I'll give you the last word on this discussion. Now, very quickly, in your estimation, why did China precipitate this standoff in the first place? And are we any closer to having a firm understanding of China's motivations? General?
Ramesh, it seems very difficult because, as you rightly said, there's a huge trust deficit that exists between the two countries, and we must trust and verify unless the Chinese themselves decide to change their modus operandi, because they have thrown all the peace and tranquility agreements that have taken place between the two countries. However, yes, what the Chinese have now decided to show, at least maybe they are, because they are on the back foot, the entire world seems to be suspecting the motives of the Chinese. Maybe, I'm just about to hope that after February 2021, now the 4th and the 5th of August at Gogra, hopefully if the Chinese do restore status quo ante, as they are from other friction points also, like you rightly said, Hot Spring and Dipsang, yes, I think this could well lead to, but as I said, trust but verify with China. However, they may have disengaged from certain friction points, but they are not very far behind from the LAC, just about 200 kilometers. And the kind of infrastructure that they have developed along the LAC, we ought to be very vigilant. Surveillance has to be 24/7. Preparation, 100%. You've got to keep our gunpowders dry. But you can only deal with China, as I always say, from a position of strength. If they know that India is not going to blink, they will do what is expected as a mature old civilization.
Right. On that note, General Kulkarni and Mr. Iyer, thank you once again for making time for us here on DD India. Appreciate it. Thank you. Right, moving on to other news we are tracking here on Newsnight. Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar on Friday called on Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi in Tehran. President Raisi was sworn in on Thursday. Minister Jaishankar attended the inauguration as well. Now, he said in a tweet that he conveyed the personal greetings of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the new Iranian president. He said President Raisi's commitment to strengthening the Iran-India relationship was manifest. So too was the convergence in their regional interests. Now, the news chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal R.K.S. Bhadoria, has concluded his visit to Israel. He called on Israeli Air Force Commander Major General Amikam Nokin, besides holding wide-ranging discussions with other officials during his visit. He flew a sortie there in an F-15 fighter and was also given an overview of the Israeli Air Force's operational environment. He visited the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial. Also, he laid a wreath at the cemetery for the Indian soldiers at Talpiot in Jerusalem. The visit marks an important milestone in India-Israel military ties. Both sides reaffirmed a shared vision of enhanced bilateral engagements and multidisciplinary professional exchanges for the future. In sports news, the Indian women's hockey team on Friday put up a spirited display before losing to Great Britain 3-4 in the bronze medal playoff at the Tokyo Olympics. Prime Minister Modi spoke to the players after the match. He praised the players for their performance. He boosted their morale, saying the nation is proud of them. Here's a report.
After the men's hockey team brought home a medal after 41 years, all eyes were on the Eves, who faced off against Great Britain for the bronze medal. The Indian girls went down fighting, losing 3-4. The Indian women's team made a remarkable turnaround after going down 0-2 to make it to 3-2 at half-time. However, Great Britain skipper Holly Pan-Webb scored the equalizer in the third quarter of the game. A penalty conversion by Grace Bolsden in the fourth quarter gave Great Britain their win.
Jan took a lot of individual meetings with the girls, and they really found the key for the next match themselves, and I think that was an important point in the match, in the tournament.
After the defeat, a wave of emotions. Disappointment tinged with pride at the team's historic performance at the Tokyo Olympics swept the nation. President Ramnath Kovind tweeted praising the Indian girls. He wrote, "Indian women's hockey team excelled on the field and won the hearts of every Indian with their stellar performance. We are proud of you all." The Prime Minister also lauded the performance of the Indian women's hockey team, praising them for the show they put up. We narrowly missed a medal in the women's hockey, but this team reflects the spirit of New India, where we give our best and scale new frontiers. More importantly, their success at Tokyo 2020 will motivate young daughters of India to take up hockey and excel in it. Proud of this team. He also spoke to the players and coach over the phone.
नमस्कार सर। हाँ जी नमस्कार सर।
नमस्ते नमस्ते। देखिए आप सब लोग बहुत बढ़िया खेले हैं। आपने इतना पसीना बहाया पिछले 5-6 साल से सब कुछ छोड़ छाड़ करके आप इसी में साधना कर रहे थे। आपका पसीना बदल नहीं ला सका, लेकिन आपका पसीना आज देश की करोड़ों बेटियों की प्रेरणा बन गया है। और मैं टीम के सभी साथियों को और आपके कोच को सबको बधाई देता हूं।
थैंक यू सर, थैंक्स अ लॉट। आपने इतना इनकरेज किया हमारी टीम को, सो थैंक यू सो मच।
और निराश बिल्कुल नहीं होना है। अच्छा, मैं देख रहा था नवनीत की आंख पर कुछ चोट आई है।
हाँ जी, कल उसको चोट आई थी, उसको 4 स्टिचेस लगे हैं। तो
अरे बाप रे, मैं देख रहा था उसको काफी अभी ठीक है, उसकी आंख को तो कोई तकलीफ नहीं हुई है ना? और वंदना वगैरह सब बहुत बढ़िया किए आपने। और सलीमा के तो सबको लगा है कि भाई सलीमा तो बहुत कमाल कर देती। हाँ।
सर थैंक यू सो मच।
आप लोग रोना बंद कीजिए। मेरे तक आवाज आ रही है। देखिए, देश आज आपका पर गर्व कर रहा है। बिल्कुल निराश नहीं होना है। और कितने दशकों के बाद हॉकी भारत की पहचान फिर से एक बार पुनर्जीवित हो रही है। आपके लोगों की मेहनत से हो रही है।
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your words, and the girls are very emotional at the moment, and I think there will be.
You have also tried your level best, and I can see that how you are encouraging our girls, and we are thankful to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you very much, sir. And I also told the girls they inspired the nation, and I think that is something very important, and they have to cherish. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Namaste.
Union Sports Minister Anurag Thakur also lauded the performance of the players, tweeting, "India's daughters are determined athletes. We are immensely proud of you. A giant leap of faith and fighting spirit by a women's hockey team, a legacy that will inspire us to do even better. You have shown us the way."
खेल दिए वो होते हैं, अपने पापा का सपना पूरा कर दिया।
लड़ती रही जी, और बड़े दिलो जान से लड़ती रही, ये नहीं है कि पीछे हट गई।
अभी हम लोग को बहुत खुशी है क्या के लिए आज इस ओलंपिक खेल में अच्छी तरह से प्रदर्शन कर सके।
हौसला इनका लड़कियों का हौसला बढ़ा है मैच को देख के, और हम सबका देशवासियों का हौसला बढ़ा है।
Looking at the way the Indian women's hockey team started its Olympic journey this time, nobody could have predicted that this team would eventually compete for the bronze medal. After 4 successive defeats, the team made a stunning comeback and defeated South Africa as well as 3-time champions Australia to make it to the semi-finals, only to bow out fighting against Argentina. The women's hockey team may not have won a medal at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, but we are all hopeful of a medal from them at the next Paris Olympics. Sports Desk, DD News.
In a landmark decision, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday announced that India's highest sporting honour, the Khel Ratna Award, will be named after hockey legend Major Dhyan Chand. The Khel Ratna Award will now be called the Major Dhyan Chand Khel Ratna Award. The Prime Minister says Major Dhyan Chand was among India's foremost sportspersons who brought honour and pride to the country. The decision comes a day after Indian men's hockey team ended the 41-year wait for an Olympic medal when it defeated Germany 5-4 and secured first hockey medal for the country since the Moscow Olympics in 1980. Here's a report.
The Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award has been renamed as the Major Dhyan Chand Khel Ratna Award. Prime Minister Narendra Modi made the announcement on Twitter. Prime Minister Modi said, "I have been getting many requests from citizens across India to name the Khel Ratna Award after Major Dhyan Chand. I thank them for their views. Respecting their sentiment, the Khel Ratna Award will hereby be called the Major Dhyan Chand Khel Ratna Award." Sports Minister Anurag Thakur also took to social media to laud the move as he tweeted, "Major Dhyan Chand is India's most legendary and loved sporting icons. It is only befitting that India's highest sporting honour be named after him. His life and achievements have inspired generations of sportspersons who have achieved glory for India." Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement comes at a time when both men's and women's hockey teams have produced a stellar show at Tokyo Olympics 2020, while the men's team led by Manpreet Singh ended the country's 41-year wait for a medal at the mega event by winning a bronze medal in Tokyo. Rani Rampal and the company reached their first ever semi-final at the biggest sporting extravaganza.
प्रधानमंत्री के निर्णय से मैं बड़ी खुशी हुई जो उन्होंने राजीव गांधी खेल रत्न का नाम बदलकर मेजर ध्यानचंद जी के नाम पे रखा गया है। इससे हमें सब खिलाड़ियों को बहुत प्रेरणा मिलेगी। धन्यवाद मोदी जी।
खेल रत्न पुरस्कार जो खेलों में सबसे बड़ा होता है, उस पुरस्कार को जो मेजर ध्यानचंद जी के ही बर्थडे के ऊपर जो उनका जन्मदिन है, जिसको कि सरकार ने संसद के अंदर मान्यता देकर इस दिन को सेलिब्रेट करने का अनुमोदन किया था, उस दिन ध्यानचंद जी के बर्थडे के ऊपर ध्यानचंद जी के अवार्ड जो कमतर तो नहीं कहूँगा मैं, क्योंकि खिलाड़ी जब कोई अवार्ड पाता तो उसकी कोई कीमत नहीं होती है। हाँ, ये बेहतर है कि कुछ अवार्ड ऐसे थे जो जिनकी कीमत कुछ ज़्यादा थी। वैसे ये फीलिंग, ये बात कहाँ से आई होगी मैं समझ नहीं पा रहा हूँ इस बात को, जो बहुत बड़ी बात है और बहुत ऊंचाई वाली बात है।
It's absolutely historic, and in fact, all the sports awards should be named after a sportsman, and what bigger than naming it after Major Dhyan Chand, what he's done for the country. I think it's unparalleled to any other sportsman.
Popularly known as the Wizard for his magical touch, superb control, creativity and extraordinary goal-scoring feats, Chand was instrumental in taking Indian hockey to greater heights under his talismanic leadership. The late hockey player had led India to 3 Olympic gold medals in the year 1928, 1932 and 1936. He had scored over 400 goals in 22 years spanning from 1926 to 1948. He was bestowed with India's third highest civilian honour, Padma Bhushan, in 1956. Regarded as the greatest of all time, Dhyan Chand also served in the Indian Army and brought laurels to the country. Sports Desk, DD India.
Right, now take a look at some more updates from the ongoing Tokyo Olympics.
Indian golfer Aditi Ashok continued her stellar performance on day 3 of the women's individual golf event. The young golfer is ranked second among 60 players after round 3 and is just behind world number 1 Nelly Korda. Aditi Ashok is considered a trailblazer for women's golf in India as she has the tag of being the first female Indian golfer at the Olympics. The other golfer in fray, Diksha Dagar, remained in the lower half of the leaderboard after an erratic 1 over 72, her third successive over par card of the week. Wrestler Bajrang Punia lost 5-12 against Haji Aliyev of Azerbaijan in the men's freestyle 65 kg category semi-finals at the ongoing Tokyo Olympics on Friday. He will now play for the bronze medal against Russia's Ghazi Murad Rashidov.
Now, soon after India's vaccination coverage crossed the 50 crore mark, Prime Minister Modi on Friday said he hopes to build on these numbers and ensure that every citizen is vaccinated. He tweeted, and I quote him here, "India's fight against COVID-19 receives a strong impetus. Vaccination numbers cross the 50 crore mark. We hope to build on these numbers and ensure our citizens are vaccinated under the Sabko Vaccine, Muft Vaccine movement," unquote. Moving on, in some good news for the corporate world, Lok Sabha passed the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill 2021 by voice vote. The bill provides for the withdrawal of tax demand made on indirect transfer of Indian assets if the transaction was undertaken before 28th May 2012, the day the retrospective tax legislation came into being. It's also proposed to refund the amount paid in these cases without any interest thereon. The bill has a direct bearing on long-running tax disputes with British firms Sky Energy and Vodafone Group.
This retrospective tax was brought in as a clarificatory amendment. Keep up the word given by the former Finance Minister Sri Arun Jaitley under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, keeping up the commitment of BJP that we don't believe in retrospective application of tax. We are fulfilling that word. जो बात हमने वायदा जो हमने दिया है इस गरिमामय सदन में, उसको पूरे करने के लिए आज ये कानून का अमेंडमेंट ले आ रहे हैं.
The Reserve Bank of India on Friday announced its bi-monthly monetary policy. It retained its accommodative monetary policy stance as the Indian economy recovers from the impact of the second COVID-19 wave. More in the next report.
For the 7th time in a row, RBI's Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, kept the policy rates unchanged. RBI Governor Shaktikant Das said that the MPC has decided to keep the benchmark repo rate, the rate at which the central bank lends short-term to banks, unchanged at 4%. Consequently, the reverse repo rate, the rate at which the RBI borrows short-term from banks, has been retained at 3.35%. All members of the MPC voted in favour of a status quo in policy rates.
Based on an assessment of the evolving domestic and global macroeconomic and financial conditions and outlook, the MPC voted unanimously to keep the policy repo rate unchanged at 4%. The MPC also decided on a 5-to-1 majority to continue with the accommodative stance as long as necessary to revive and sustain growth on a durable basis and continue to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the economy while inflation remains within the target going forward.
Further, the Reserve Bank retained its GDP growth projection at 9.5% for the 2021-22 fiscal year. The real GDP growth for the first quarter of 2022-23 has been projected at 17.2%.
The projection for real GDP growth is retained at 9.5% for 2021-22. Real GDP growth for Q1 22-23, that is next financial year, is projected at 17.2%.
But the RBI has revised its consumer price inflation CPI estimate for the financial year 2021-22 to 5.7%, higher than the previous forecast of 5.1%. The RBI also decided to extend the on-tap TLTRO, that is Targeted Long-Term Repo Operation Scheme, by 3 months till 31st of December 2021 to ensure that there is enough liquidity in the markets. The Reserve Bank of India will also conduct 2 more auctions of 25,000 crore rupees each on August 12th and August 26th under the Government Security Acquisition Program GSAP. The Reserve Bank remains in all readiness mode to deploy all its policy levers, monetary, prudential or regulatory, to maintain financial stability and gradually move towards policy normalization. Bureau Report, DD India.
And with that, it's a wrap. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Here's wishing you all a very happy weekend. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.